Get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Brittany Mellinger. I'm the Fair Housing Training and Outreach Coordinator at the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, and you're joining us for one of our Fair Housing Empower Hours series. Today, we're going to be talking about fair housing protections for LGBTQ plus Pennsylvanians. I am going to put a disclaimer in the chat here, and it states that the Wiretap Act, it is against the law in Pennsylvania to record oral conversations without the permission of the folks involved in most circumstances and consent to recording. This session is being recorded for training and/or record-keeping purposes. By participating in the session, you are consenting to the recording, retention, and use of the session. At any time, if you have a question or comment, feel free to place that in the chat and we'll respond to you as soon as possible. If you would like to ask your question or comment verbally, please note that by doing so, you are consenting to the recording, retention, and use of your statements recorded as part of the session. And if you have any questions, please let us know. And thank you to everyone that said a quick hello in the chat. We're glad that you're here today. I do want to note that we are not able to offer ASL or captioning for our session today, but we do hope to be able to offer that again shortly. So we all have the right to fair housing in Pennsylvania, and our fair housing laws place really important protections in place to make sure that we can all have equal access and opportunity for housing. And that's why we're here today to talk about that. I want to give one more disclaimer that information, materials, and/or technical assistance are intended solely as informal guidance and are neither a determination of your legal rights or responsibilities under the PHRA and/or applicable federal laws, nor are binding on any agency with enforcement responsibility under those same laws. Okay, I see a message in the chat that someone's having difficulty hearing me. Can I get some confirmation that other folks are able to hear correctly? I want to see if it's an issue on my end or maybe an issue on someone else's end. All right, I'm seeing a thumbs up and someone else can hear me. Okay, excellent. Michelle, Director Griffin is providing technical assistance for this session. I'm hopeful that she'll be able to help you work through this to be able to hear the session. So thanks everyone for providing that feedback and for your patience as technical stuff doesn't always go exactly as planned. All right. So our goals in the next hour are to talk about LGBTQ plus housing and discrimination statistics, just to kind of set the stage for our conversation. Then we'll go into an overview of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission and our work. We're going to be identifying relevant fair housing laws and protected classes, and then sharing in more detail about the state and federal housing protections for LGBTQ individuals. We'll talk about specific acts of discrimination and what that can look like. And then we'll go through our complaint process for anyone that believes that they may have experienced discrimination and would like to file a complaint, so that way you know what that process looks like. And lastly, and most importantly, we'll answer your fair housing questions. So please feel free to put any questions or comments or feedback in the chat throughout the presentation. I will get to as much as I possibly can throughout the course of the presentation, and we'll definitely save time in the end to address any questions there as well. So I want to set the context for a discussion by providing a couple statistics for you. So I wanted to start off at looking at some of the housing inequalities that are faced by individuals that are in the LGBTQ community, looking first at the poverty rate. So we see that adults in the LGBTQ community have higher rates of poverty, 22%, and that's combined with 16% of cisgendered heterosexual adults based on data in 2021. We see that there are substantial differences in homeownership. So homeownership rates are lower for LGBTQ adults than non-LGBTQ adults, 51% versus 71%, and that's based on data and research from the Urban Institute. We also know that LGBTQ youth are overrepresented in homeless populations or houseless populations, and that they're 120% more likely to experience homelessness than non-LGBTQ youth. We also see substantial issues of housing discrimination. So in the 2025 LGBTQ plus Real Estate Alliance report, they found that 1/3 of their members report seeing an increase in discrimination against potential LGBTQ plus homeowners looking over the past few years, and that's much higher than in previous years. And they have a lot of other great statistics in that report that's linked there as well. There was a study in 2022 from the Center for American Progress that had some significant findings. So that they reported out that 1 in 5 LGBTQ individuals report experiencing verbal harassment in a housing setting, that 15% of LGBTQ residents report being prevented or discouraged from renting or buying a home, and that 12% of LGBTQ respondents report harassment from their landlord. And in another report from the Equal Rights Center, there was a matched pair testing investigation looking at older adult same-sex couples who were seeking senior housing. And this was a study of 200 testers. And they found that 48% of the LGBT testers received adverse differential treatment. So we know that discrimination is still very prevalent in our communities, it still happens today, and it can impact our communities differently. And I want to share some stats as well. So looking at national trends, the National Fair Housing Alliance publishes an annual report, and the 2025 report, which was just released last month, found that in 2024 there were 257 cases of discrimination reported nationally on the basis of sexual orientation and 188 on the basis of gender identity or expression. So this includes complaints that were submitted to HUD, to state and local enforcement agencies, as well as to private fair housing enforcement agencies. Looking specifically at complaints received from PHRC, our most recently released annual report we put out in 2024, and that covers fiscal year 23 to 24. So that's the second half of 23 to the first half of 24. We received 3 housing complaints on the basis of sexual orientation and 1 on the basis of gender identity. So I know those stats may look a little bit low, but we also know that there's a lot of barriers to reporting housing discrimination. There's lots of reasons why folks might choose not to report, even if they experience housing discrimination. It could be from a fear of safety, fear of further discrimination and retaliation, a lack of other housing options, as well as a lack of knowledge of housing protections. So that's why we're putting on this program today, and we've got other resources available so that way folks have a full understanding of their fair housing rights and responsibilities and can take action if they believe that they're experiencing discrimination. So that's just some basic information to kind of set the context for our discussion. I also would like to provide an intro to the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission for anyone that's on the call that might not be familiar with our work. So we have a 2-part mission. We enforce Pennsylvania's non-discrimination laws, which include both the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act as well as the Pennsylvania Fair Educational Opportunities Act. So if someone believes that they've experienced discrimination, whether it's in their housing, in their employment, their education, in their ability to get public services or access public spaces, they can file a complaint and have our agency investigate the situation. But we don't just wait for complaints to arise, we also actively work to promote equal opportunity for all in Pennsylvania. We do this through trainings and programs and workshops like this. We hold events and symposiums in communities throughout the Commonwealth, and we also have advisory councils which are made up of volunteers in local communities all throughout Pennsylvania, helping to spread the word about people's protections and rights and responsibilities, and to report back to PHRC when they become aware of issues um, that are under PHRC's jurisdiction. We serve the entire state of Pennsylvania, and we do that through 3 regional offices. So you can see the dark blue third of the state in the western region. That's covered by our Pittsburgh regional office. Our central region in that light blue color, that's covered by our Harrisburg regional office. And the medium blue on the eastern part of the state, that's covered by our Philadelphia regional office. So if you believe you've got a complaint or have questions about an investigation, you would work with those regional offices to address those. All right, and I want to just provide a breakdown of which laws cover which areas of protection. So the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, that covers employment, it covers housing, commercial property, public accommodations, as well as primary and secondary education. And the Pennsylvania Fair Educational Opportunities Act covers post-secondary education. Um, so the PHRA, that would cover education up through high school, and then the PFEOA would cover colleges, trade schools, and technical schools. Our focus is housing today, but if you have questions about any of our other areas of our work, we've got lots of great information on our website, and we also have training programs on those as well. All right, what do our fair housing laws do? There are 2 goals of fair housing. So the first one is ending housing discrimination, making sure that no one is kept out of housing because of discriminatory practices and policies. But fair housing goes beyond that. It goes to promote diverse, inclusive communities, and that's known as affirmatively furthering fair housing. So acknowledging that our country has a long history and decades of discriminatory practices and policies and laws leading up to the Fair Housing Act, and that these policies and actions, these policies and actions have created housing inopportunities and inequalities, and we have a lot of active work that we need to do to address the promise of fair housing. Our fair housing laws cover the sale and rental of housing, as well as housing-related transactions. So sale and rental is relatively straightforward, but a lot of folks might not know what a housing-related transaction looks like or what that might mean. And there are many industries that surround housing and can influence someone's access and opportunity to housing. So looking at the ability to get a fair appraisal for the value of your home if you're looking to sell or finance housing, the ability to get homeowners or renters insurance, the ability to get a mortgage. There's lots of industries that can influence access to housing, and our fair housing laws cover those industries as well. The types of housing that are covered by our fair housing laws are pretty broad. So anything from apartments to single-family homes, manufactured housing communities, condominiums, public housing, nursing homes, dormitories, and more. There's even some types of shelters that are covered by our fair housing laws. And there's 2 specific discrimination theories or types of discrimination that I'd like to highlight today. The first is disparate treatment. That's treatment that directly discriminates against a member of a protected class. So for example, looking at an individual with a disability, say someone with a disability goes to tour an apartment unit and is told that they're not able to get that unit because the landlord thinks that the unit isn't safe for them given their disability. They receive disparate treatment and denial of that housing based on their protected class. Disparate impact. That's a policy that's facially neutral, doesn't mention any protected class, but it has a substantial or disparate impact on a member of a protected class. So looking again at the protected class of disability, that could be a housing provider's policy that that all tenants need to have full-time employment to qualify for a rental unit at that property. So we know that individuals with disability statistically have a a lower percentage of full-time employment than the general population. So this policy is likely to have that disparate or disproportionate impact in limiting housing opportunities for individuals with disabilities. Next up, I'd like to talk about our various levels of fair housing laws. So we have our federal fair housing laws, and those include the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968, as well as Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 that adds additional protections for individuals who are in federally subsidized housing. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, the ADA, that provides additional protections for individuals with disabilities. As I mentioned just a minute ago, our state law, the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, that covers state protections and forms the basis of our state protections in Pennsylvania. And then there are also local ordinances as well. There's over 70 different local ordinances in Pennsylvania that may add additional fair housing protections. So for example, as we're going to discuss in just a minute, um, Pennsylvania does not have sexual orientation or gender identity as specific protected classes under the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. Although we do have protections, they're not specifically called out as separate protected classes, but you may find that in local ordinances in your area. So it's always important to be aware of what those ordinances are and what those additional protections entail. We are going to be focusing primarily on the federal and the state laws today, and I want to provide a few key differences between those laws and protections. So housing providers with 4 or more properties are required to abide by our Fair Housing Act, unless a housing provider would advertise their vacancies or receive federal funding. So there's that exemption for small landlords under the FHA. But if a housing provider is advertising their vacancies or if they're receiving federal funding, they do need to comply with that act. At the state level, under the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, there isn't that exemption for small landlords, and housing providers with 1 or more properties do need to comply. The filing timeline looks a little bit different at the federal and the state level. So under the Federal Fair Housing Act, complaints must be filed within 365 days of the date of the last harm. So they have to be filed with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development within a year. Under the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, if someone wishes to file a complaint with our agency, with the PHRC, that complaint has to be filed within 180 days of the date of the last harm or within the past 6 months. All right, my next slide has a list of protected classes, but I always like to see uh, how many my audience and the folks attending this training are able to identify in the chat. So I'd encourage you to pull up your chat box and if you're able, type in any protected classes that you're familiar with. Could be at the federal level, at the state level, or perhaps at the local level in your locality. Anyone willing to venture a guess on any protected classes that they're familiar with? Source of income. Thank you, Jessica. Yes, that is a protection in several different localities throughout Pennsylvania. It's not at the federal or the state level, but it is present in several different areas throughout the state. Race, yes, thank you. Age, age 40 and above. That's at the state level. Disability, yes, absolutely. There are some more folks typing as well. Let's see, race, color, disability, age, gender, and familial status. Gender identity and expression. Yeah, that's present at a lot of localities throughout Pennsylvania, and that's covered under the protected class of sex under our state law. Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation. All right. Immigrant status. Thank you for bringing that up because that is covered under national origin at the federal and the state level. Absolutely. All right, so under the Federal Fair Housing Act, that covers race, color, national origin, familial status, religion, sex, and disability. You can see that it's closely mirrored on the right-hand side of the screen under the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, which covers race, color, national origin, familial status, religious creed, sex, and disability, and it also adds on age 40 and above, as well as ancestry and the use, handling, or training of support animals for disability. I'm going to cover familial status, as well as disability and sex in a little bit more detail today. So familial status, that includes families with children under the age of 18 who are living with their parents or legal custodians. It includes people who are pregnant as well as people who are securing custody of children under the age of 18, and that's both foster children and biological children. There are some age-related exemptions through the Housing for Older Persons Act. So there are some senior living facilities, 55 and over communities, as well as 62 and over communities, which are specifically for older adults, and they've got specific specifications to be able to fall under this exemption, but those types of communities would have the ability to deny residency to families with children if they're in compliance with that act. Disability is defined as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more of a person's major life activities. So some examples include caring for oneself, walking, seeing, hearing, speaking, breathing, learning, or working. And our fair housing laws protect those who have a disability, those who have a history of a disability, as well as those who are regarded as having a disability. So if you have that disability that that meets that definition of that substantial limitation of one or more of a person's major life activities, or if you receive unfair treatment on the basis of your history, of your disability and your medical records, or because of the way that someone regards you as having a disability, you can also file a complaint as well. There are a few key exemptions that I want to highlight. So individuals who are currently using illegal drugs, or controlled substances, they would be exempted from disability-related protection. That does not include those who are in active recovery. So if someone is currently in active recovery, they would have disability-related protections, but if someone is currently using, they would not. Individuals who pose a direct threat to the health and safety of others are also exempt from disability-related protection. And I also want to discuss sex as a protected class under the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. So you didn't see LGBTQ, you didn't see sexual orientation and gender identity as separate protected classes under the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, but PHRC did finalize regulations in 2023 that can establish that the term sex may refer to pregnancy status, sex assigned at birth, gender identity or expression, affectional or sexual orientation, as well as differences in sex development. And these regulations are utilized by the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission as we accept complaints, conduct investigations, and adjudicate cases. And you can find those regs on our website at the link at the bottom of the screen. And I do want to mention that these slides will be sent out along with a copy of the recording to everyone who registered for the training today. All right, I want to talk a little bit about a timeline of housing protections for LGBTQ Pennsylvanians. We're going to start off with the federal housing protections timeline. So I want to highlight in 2020, there was a case, Bostock versus Clayton County. And you can find the case at the link there. This is a case before the Supreme Court that was regarding the firing of an employee because of sexual orientation and gender identity. And the question at hand was, does sex include discrimination based on sexual orientation? And the decision did affirm that. So then in 2021, President Biden issued the Executive Order 13988, which you can find at the link on the screen there. And that was enforcing prohibitions on sex discrimination on the basis uh, of gender identity or sexual orientation. And it directed the head of each agency to review existing orders, regulations, guidance documents, policies, programs, and other agency actions um, to address that. So that was followed up fairly shortly by later that year in 2021, there was a memorandum on implementation of Executive Order 13988 on the enforcement of the Fair Housing Act. So how HUD was going to apply this to their work on housing discrimination. And this was from Janine Warden, who was the active Assistant Secretary for Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity at HUD. And it stated that effective immediately, FHEO would accept for filing an investigation all complaints of sex discrimination, including discrimination based on gender identity or sexual orientation that would meet other jurisdictional requirements. So the last time I presented this at a Fair Housing and Power Hour, it was the end of 2024, and this was the end of the federal timeline, but there have been significant actions that have happened this year as well, and we'll be highlighting those next. So in early 2025, there was an Executive Order 14168, and that was entitled Defending Women from Gender Ideology Extremism and Restoring Biological Truth to the Federal Government. And this executive order stated that each agency and all federal employees shall enforce laws governing sex-based rights, protections, opportunities, and accommodations to protect men and women as biologically distinct sexes, and it rescinded the final, directed the head of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to rescind the final equal access rule. So then after that, Secretary Turner did issue an order to halt pending or future enforcement of that equal access rule. And in September, there were a set of memos that were issued. The first one had memorandum, Fair Housing Act enforcement and prioritization of resources. This was issued from John Gibbs, the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. And it addressed some of the ways that fair housing laws had been enforced, including around gender identity. And it stated that those resources for those types of investigations will no longer be prioritized. The next day, there was another memorandum that was issued by Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary Gibbs, and that was entitled Implementation of, and that addressed the rescinding of FHEO guidance documents. It rescinded a number of different documents related to fair housing laws and enforcement, and it rescinded one based on implementation of Executive Order 13988 on enforcement of the Fair Housing Act. So the memo that allowed federal fair housing enforcement to accept complaints on the basis of gender identity and sexual orientation. So we've seen substantial rollbacks in fair housing protections for individuals on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. But the good news is that PHRC has taken substantial steps to make sure that there are housing protections in place. So I want to cover a few different things. So first, touching on guidance that was issued in 2018, and then discussing the regulations that were introduced in 2023 and finalized, or in 2022 and then finalized in 2023. So looking at the 2018 guidance first. So this guidance is an exercise of the authority granted to the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission to formulate policies to effectuate the purposes of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. And it stated that nothing in this guidance shall affect statutory or regulatory requirements. This guidance was neither an adjudication nor regulation, and there was no intent on the part of the Commission to give this guidance this type of binding force or effect. This guidance simply indicates the manner in which the Commission intends to exercise its administrative discretion in accepting complaints, conducting investigations, and adjudicating cases, unless it is convinced otherwise during the course of a specific proceeding. And the Commission, as in the past, remains committed to ensuring that its adjudicative determinations are made on a case-by-case basis after consideration of all evidence of record in the given matter. And this guidance stated that the term sex under the PHRA may refer to sex assigned at birth, sexual orientation, transgender identity, gender transition, gender identity, and/or gender expression, depending on the individual facts of the case. So this guidance allowed PHRC to accept those cases in that manner. It was followed up on in 2022, where we introduced regulations, went through the IRC process and received approval, and was published in the Pennsylvania Bulletin on June 17, 2023, and then came into effect in August 16, 2023. And that states that the final form rulemaking provides clarity to ensure that the term sex is used throughout the PHRA and the PFEOA, including in the provisions prohibiting discrimination in employment, housing, commercial property, public accommodations, and educational institutions is interpreted consistently. And I want to review the terms that are included in sex that we discussed earlier in the presentation. So that regulation includes pregnancy status, sex assigned at birth, gender identity or expression, affectional or sexual orientation, as well as differences in sex development. So I want to be clear that anyone who believes that they've experienced discrimination on any of these bases can file that complaint under the protected class of sex. Next, I want to discuss discriminatory actions briefly. I know we don't have a lot of time together today, but I want to discuss about what this might look like in real life. So, discriminatory statements that could state an advertisement that would only the housing provider is only going to rent to certain groups of individuals. A discriminatory inquiry, that could be asking about someone's country of origin or asking about their marital status or about their partner as they're going through that leasing or home sale process. It could be steering someone to a certain community on the basis of their sexual orientation or their gender identity. It could be an unfair appraisal because of someone's race. Could be predatory lending based on a protected class, discrimination in the housing terms and conditions. So that could be offering someone different terms of their lease based on their sexual orientation, based on their gender expression. Could be a denial of housing, refusing to rent housing to a same-sex couple because of their family composition. Could be unequal provision of services and facilities. So refusing to provide maintenance services to someone based on their identity. Harassment could be a maintenance worker who is subjecting a female tenant to pervasive harassment because of her sexual orientation. And additional discrimination can occur if a tenant reports that harassment to the housing provider who fails to take any action to stop that harassment. Could be an eviction after the housing provider would discover that the tenant has dated persons of the same sex and would identify as bisexual. Another example would be a same-sex couple who asks a realtor to see rental units throughout the city, but is only shown rental units in a part of the city that's known for having many LGBTQ residents. Perhaps refusing to add a same-sex partner to the lease in a senior living facility because the community only accepts married couples and unions between one man and one woman. So these examples happen in real life all the time. And then the last one, their refusal to provide reasonable accommodations and modifications to someone based on their disability. All right, so how does someone address these types of discrimination? They do have the right to file a complaint at PHRC, and that starts by contacting our offices. So you can contact the office nearest to you, or you can call our main number, and you'll get directed to the right spots. I do want to note that our Harrisburg office address has recently changed. So if you're coming in person to the office, please note that we are now at 555 Walnut Street, up on the 8th floor in Suite 808. We are no longer at our old address on Market Street. You can also send us an email. You can go on our website. We've got lots of great information on our social media as well. There's lots of different ways to get to the right person to get your complaint started. And if someone believes that they've experienced housing discrimination, they would connect with PHRC's intake team. They'd be asked to fill out a housing questionnaire to provide contact information about what they experienced, as well as who they're filing a complaint against. The intake team will assess their information to see if this is a situation that we can investigate under our state law. If the complaint is jurisdictional and if it's timely, then the intake team will help them to finalize their complaint. And then the person who is filed against would be notified. So the person filing the complaint is known as the complainant, and the person who is filed against, they're known as the respondent, since they're responding to that complaint. And then the complaint would enter the investigative phase. So both parties will be asked to provide information to a neutral investigator who's responsible for investigating if there was a violation of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. And they'll do that through asking for documents, potentially interviewing the parties and witnesses, maybe holding a fact-finding hearing, going on site, seeking other ways of obtaining evidence. We do have an excellent mediation team, and mediation services may be an option depending on the facts of the case and depending if both parties would agree to mediation. Mediation is completely voluntary, but it can lead to a quicker resolution, and it is also a confidential process. But regardless, the investigator will explore if it's possible to settle the case before coming to a finding. If the case does proceed to a finding, there's two potential outcomes. So probable cause means that there was enough evidence uncovered to establish that discrimination did occur. No probable cause means that there was not enough evidence discovered to establish discrimination. If no probable cause was found, then that's pretty much where the case ends unless it's appealed. If probable cause is found, the case may be conciliated, it may advance to public hearing, or be filed in court. And at this point, our agency is no longer neutral since we are seeking to find a remedy for the discrimination that occurred. A lot of times I get asked, well, how long does it take for an investigation to get concluded? And I don't have a great answer for you because there's a lot of variation in the amount of time. It's based on the evidence, it's based on how quickly both parties respond, as well as other factors specific to the case. Now, why would someone go through this whole complaint process, go through the intake and investigation, all the way to the end? Well, there are significant remedies that can be achieved through this process. So if it's an individual with a disability that needs a reasonable accommodation or modification, that can be, they can get that achieved. Perhaps there are lease policies or other policies of a housing provider or a lender or a realtor that are discriminatory. There can be required changes that are made to these policies to ensure that all tenants and prospective home buyers are able to have fair policies that are compliant with our fair housing laws. There's sometimes posting of fair housing notices and training for respondents to make sure that everyone is fully aware of their rights and responsibilities. And there are also financial remedies that can be achieved as well. So anything from reimbursement of fees and out-of-pocket expenses to money for humiliation and embarrassment, which is similar to pain and suffering, as well as civil penalties that can be assessed as a violation for violating our state law. And to give you an idea of some recent PHRC housing awards, you can find some on the screen here. So 1.5 million, that's where a housing provider failed to provide accessible units and then ignored requests for reasonable accommodations for tenants with disabilities. $100,000, where a maintenance worker sexually harassed a female tenant. $90,000, where a housing provider revoked a lease or failed to address neighbor harassment based on race. And $77,000, where a housing provider made discriminatory statements and refused to rent to a household based on familial status. So you can see we do have awards on a variety of cases covering different actions as well as different protected classes as well. I do want to highlight a few federal fair housing cases. They aren't on the screen here, but there have been some recent cases specific to our topic today, specific to LGBTQ complainants. So there was HUD on behalf of John Doe versus Leaf Property Investments. HUD issued a determination of cause and filed a charge based on a hostile environment, constructive eviction, and discriminatory statements in violation of the Act of Wisconsin. And the remedy was $40,000 and the requirement that the property manager cease from managing residential properties or contacting the complainant, adopting policies and mandatory training. And then there's also a case in Florida, HUD versus 21 Palms RV Resort, and that's a mobile home in Central Florida. In this case, was based on the clothing and gender expression and identity, discriminatory terms and conditions, and harassment, and that remedy included $45,000 in training. If you would like to learn more about this topic or about fair housing in general, we do have resources for you. So we have a fair housing line, which is 855-866-5718. You can give us a call if you have fair housing questions, and we can provide you information and resources and get you to the right place. We offer free housing training programs if you're interested, like this, but it's certainly more in depth that we can cover in an hour. And we do offer these Fair Housing and Power Hour sessions on a monthly basis. Our next one is in December, and that's going to be on accessibility. We have a number of written brochures and fact sheets that are available to you. You can get digital copies on our website at the link on the screen, and we can also send you hard copy ones as well. I do want to point out the bottom image on the screen there, the rainbow one does highlight LGBTQ protections, and that is a great one that's related to our topic today. We have an archive of episodes of PHRC Speaks, Fair Housing Forward. That's a show that is aired on PCN TV and featured interviews with housing experts and community leaders and PHRC staff around emerging and relevant fair housing issues. Lastly, there's a link on the screen there to our Fair Housing White Paper, which is called The State of Fair Housing in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And that's a look into the real barriers and issues that are impacting fair housing opportunities in Pennsylvania and what we can do about that. All right, my last slide here has my contact information. So if you do have questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me via email. You can call our central office and reach out to our fair housing line. I also want to let you know that there's a QR code on the screen there. So if you want, you can provide us some feedback on this session. You can also download a certificate of attendance as well. So if you are interested in documenting that you did this professional development today, you can certainly do that. I'm also going to put a link in the chat as well. If that's easier than the QR code, you are welcome to that as well. And then I'm also going to put one additional link in the chat. That's to our upcoming events. So if you are interested, we also have Some other great events that are coming up. Tomorrow night, there's going to be a Know Your Rights Roundtable in Washington, Pennsylvania. So if you're in that area, I encourage you to come out and talk with our team and our partners about that important topic. We also have a virtual lunch and learn coming up on December 2nd, and that is Native Women and Allies Speak What We Weren't Taught in School. And as I mentioned on December 19th, that's our accessibility and fair housing session of our Fair Housing Empower Hour. So I'm going to take a quick pause and check the chat to see if there are any questions that came up throughout the presentation. I'd invite you to put any questions that you have in the chat as well, because we do have some time reserved at the end, as we always do, to make sure that we can address any questions that you have. Thanks so much for your comment, Jessica. I'm glad that you found it helpful. It's very important to stay abreast of these changes and because of how they can impact housing rights and responsibilities for our community members. So this does conclude the program, but if there are any questions, I will spend some time here over the next couple minutes. So if you do have any additional questions, please let me know. But I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. All right, since there have been no questions, I'm going to close this out. Thank you so much, everyone.